Hey bass fisherman, are you going crankbait fishing?
If you are, choosing the right rod makes a big difference.
It's Dave.
And Dan.
And welcome to another video from Beyond Headwaters. And today we are talking crankbait fishing, or rather fishing a rod selection, the best rod selection for crankbait fishing. Right, Dan?
That's right, that's right. So remember to like and subscribe to videos, guys. In some of the other videos we've done, we've talked about selecting rods, like a topwater rod and things. And we were talking about crankbait fishing. Yep. And the rods I like, the rods you like. So we thought we'd do a quick video of our rod selection, why we do what we do, and give you an idea of what we think works really well, especially in the state of Florida.
Yeah. So walk us through what you look for in a good crankbait type of rod.
Okay, so a lot of times distance matters with your casting. So to get your bait down to the right depth, you're going to need a longer cast, because if you make short 30-foot cast, your bait doesn't get down to its regular running depth for quite a ways. So a long cast, what will get you a long cast usually is a longer rod. I would go with a minimum of 7-foot rod. Okay, so that way I get my distance that I need to get that crankbait out there, and then work it down where it comes down and run it at the depth that the bait is supposed to run. And
if you're in a kayak, you need to go even a little longer, because you're lower in the lower to the water, and you need to get that cast. So you need to get that cast out. I know a lot of guys use will go to even a 7.6.
Yeah, 7.6
from a kayak.
And I've heard of a few rods that are being almost 8 feet.
Yep.
That's really specialized. So a lot of what our conversation really is going to be about today is more just general crankbait fishing, especially more geared for me and you to Florida bass fishing. So if you're not throwing crankbaits in Florida, you're really missing out. I catch a lot of fish on crankbaits. So my rod selection makes a big difference. A lot of the areas that I'm fishing, I don't have to make that really long 120 foot cast to get that lure down to 15 feet. A lot of the lures I'm fishing, Dave, are these little small squarebills. They're fantastic. I put a lot of fish in the boat with a squarebill. I've caught, matter of fact, way back years ago, my first 2 limits that I caught in a tournament mine setting, one was on a lipless crankbait and the other was on a diving crankbait that had a larger lip in it. I think I still have, I could show you the lure that I fished. So over the years I've learned different things about the rod selection. And rods have changed a lot over the past 25, 30 years. Now, like this one is a composite rod. It's basically a composite rod. It's like mixed with fiberglass and graphite. It's not very stiff. Grab into that rod, Dave. Yep. You'll notice that the rod bends throughout the blank, and that's what you really need, because every bait you have, it's got these have little tiny treble hooks on it. So I want a rod that's nice and soft. It's got a nice soft bend to it. So
would that be considered a moderate?
This is considered a moderate action rod. So I have my glasses on. This one is it's a medium heavy, moderate action. And as we discussed in some of the other videos, those designators on your rod are not completely consistent throughout all of the industry, because each manufacturer has different blanks and rod design. So I go by feel. So one, I know with the crankbait rod, I want to look for a rod that is designed for crankbait fishing, like this particular rod is. And it doesn't matter in a lot of ways your price point. I've got rods that are very expensive, over $300. This one happens to be a $50 rod. A lot of fish have been caught on this rod. So our main point is talking to you about the action of the rod. How's that rod designed? How's it going to work? So one way that I learned feel the action of a rod, years ago, is I worked in a tackle shop and I'd actually feel the rod. You can either bend the rod down on the floor if you have carpet, which we don't have carpet here, but you can get an idea of how that rod feels under the load of a fish, or on a ceiling. You can really, I really like putting it on the ceiling. You can actually feel the rod like you'd be fighting a fish. So the action of the rod makes a big difference. The softness. You know, you can't get too soft with the rod. You can definitely get too heavy with the rod. You don't want to fish a crankbait on a worm rod. Can you? Yes, but you tend to lose more fish on a heavier rod because the hooks tear out pretty easy. So years ago, I was a latecomer to fishing braided lines, and then it took me a while to really get into the braid. But as I started using it, there's so many benefits to braided line that I'm about 95% braided line now. Almost everything. Now I do use a lot of fluorocarbon leaders and things, but so with that in mind, I use a little bit lighter drag, a little bit lighter action of a rod, so I'm not ripping those hooks out of fish, because you can catch some big fish on crankbaits, just like you can topwaters and other things. So those fish, they charge pretty hard. They're really digging hard, and if you have a really stout rod or really tight drag, you're likely to have those fish tear that hook.
Right.
They'll literally tear their skin as they're pulling, and you'll lose the fish.
So are these generally fast tip rods?
You can get some that are fast, but most of them they have a, if you can find a nice, like a moderate bend rod with a fast tip, that's going to be good. That faster tip gets that rod, or your lure, really gets you a good cast, gets some distance there. So,
and as we've said in past videos, that there is no industry level standard for moderate fats. So each company kind of sets their own
yeah, well, with each blank, so even within each individual line, like if you look at the St. Croix lines, just for instance, they have their Mojo, and they have this one, and they have each line of rods. You know, you got different lines of rods. Will have, because the blanks are made a little bit different, you're going to have a little bit different rod. You know, and that goes through St. Croix, Tsunami, Star, all of them. You know, so
I guess my point is, you really need to pick up these rods
and feel them.
Feel them before you buy them, or you can certainly order them on Amazon and return them if you don't like them.
That was always my problem with buying rods online, which I have done. And I've had some good success with that, and some not so much, is I can't feel the rod.
Right.
Years ago, I worked in a high-end tackle shop, and I felt a lot of rods. We had carpet there, and I would bend the rods on the floor. It really gives me a good feel for the rod, or I'd bend them on the ceiling. And you just got to be careful you don't break the rod tip off. But it really gives you a good feeling of the rod. Okay, when I'm really into a fish, really pulling hard, how's that going to feel? And you know, you guys have caught quite a few fish. You start saying, okay, now I can feel that in that rod. Okay, that's about right. No, that's too light. No, that's too heavy. That gives me a good idea. That's how I would select a rod. Now,
so check, make sure if you order online, understand or be clear on what the return policy is.
Yes.
For fishing rod.
Absolutely.
Especially for fishing rod.
Yeah, and it's not a bad way to buy rods, especially if you already know the rod.
Exactly.
But I like to go to my local retailer and actually feel those rods. And there's a lot of guys, like we have a really nice tackle shop here close by. Those guys, they fish all the time. They can help you out and offer some suggestions. Hey, check this rod. Hey, I got another one at a similar price point. You know, you maybe can spend another $20 and get this with a better one. So there's a lot of aspects to that.
All right, Dan. Well, thanks. My last question is, what are some of the, and I like to ask this almost every video, what are some of the common mistakes you see in crankbait fishing, especially when it comes to a rod?
Okay, so some of the mistakes I've made is, one, years ago, everything had to be like a broom handle. It was
Yeah,
just so
yeah.
stiff, and I lost so many fish over time. That is one, it's choosing a rod that's too stiff. Now, if you're say you're fishing Texas and Toledo Bend, and you're throwing those big honking crankbaits, you're going to need a big heavy rod to throw that big heavy bait. Keep that in mind. Most of the stuff I do is going to be smaller crankbaits like squarebills, stuff that might run to 10 feet maybe. They're not real big. So that's one thing to think about. You're going to need a heavier, stouter rod to throw those really big crankbaits. But here, for what I do, I need a rod that's not going to be too stiff. So that's one mistake. Another mistake that I've messed up on is having my drag just set too tight.
Yeah.
You got to remember, it's especially a lot of times a crankbait is more open water, so you got a lot of water around you, so you don't have to get him in the boat this second. Same way like offshore. I was offshore a couple weeks ago, and we were catching kingfish. You know, you're talking fish that are this big that scream drag. If your drag's too tight, which we had it happen, we had a fish tear the hook out of their mouth or out of the skin. So too tight of a drag. So too stiff a rod, too tight of a drag. Keep in mind too, braided line.
That's where I was going to go next.
Okay. So what was your question about braided?
What kind of line do you prefer? Line, leader, straight line?
All right, so being in Florida, we have so much vegetation.
Yeah.
So I've found that I really prefer a braided line with a fluorocarbon leader. Usually I'll pull off an arm's length, that's about 5.5 feet, and I'll tie that on. It gives me a little bit of shock absorber. But the reason I like the braid is we're fishing the grass a lot, and you're going to hit grass. If you're not bumping into grass when you're throwing when you're bass fishing in Florida and you're never hung up, you're doing it wrong. So you need to be able to get into that cover and around that cover. So what's really nice about fishing braided line is when I'm reeling, and I usually fish pretty fast with these little square bills. I hit the grass, I can pop that rod tip and shed that grass. It'll actually, instead of pulling that grass out of the bottom, it'll break those little stems. And a lot of times, Dave, you'll get bit as soon as that thing comes loose. So the braided line really helps me a lot with getting more strikes, because now I'm not hung up dragging a bunch of hydrilla back to the boat. I've cleared that fouling, and I'm back into fishing in a half a second. So that makes a big difference. That is the number one reason that I use braid for what I do. There are other situations that I would use monofilament, especially in super clear water. I'd either go with a really long fluorocarbon leader and lighten it up, or I'd go straight monofilament. And then in that respect too, I'd go with a little bit heavier duty rod with that monofilament, because you got to remember, guys, you have a lot of stretch in mono. If you don't believe me, tie some line on a fence post and walk out 50 feet and pull and see how much it really stretches, and then try it with your braid. It's a huge difference. Huge difference.
Well, there you go, folks. Some great advice on crankbait fishing, the rod selection. Let us know what you think. Please comment below.
Absolutely.
Your setup, your favorite rods. Hey, if you got pictures, send them over. We love to post them on our website. Love the pictures. So I want to thank you all for watching. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of people think or don't think about throwing crankbaits in Florida. It's a great way to catch a lot of fish. I catch, and my clients catch a lot of fish on crankbaits, especially a lot of the square bills. And we hope this really helps you out, guys. We wouldn't tell you to go do it if we didn't think it was going to work. So remember, like and subscribe to our videos.
See you on the next one, and God bless you.
See you guys.